Before we get to the show, there was a couple things that didn't get mentioned during today's interview breakdown of the Seattle event that I really wanted to make sure the listeners are aware of. First of all, for anybody who's not familiar with Justin, he made a truly excellent how to play versus video that I think is the gold standard as far as directing new players to our community towards. And I failed to give him any kind of recognition for that during the show. So there will be a link to that in the show notes, as well as his other projects, the Guardians 3000, the Deconstruct the Universe, which we do remember to mention during the broadcast. The only other kind of housekeeping issue is with this particular episode, it was recorded over multiple days. There were technical issues throughout it. So there are a few places where the conversation might flow a little weird. That's because I edited out things like us solving technical issues or trying to get back on track from where we were before the last time we were interrupted. Overall, I think this is a great conversation, but there are just a couple little eccentricities here and there that the astute listener may be able to pick out, like, wait, that didn't flow correctly. Setting all of that aside, very happy to have Justin back on the show. So, without further housekeeping issues, let's get right to the interview.
And we are back on the build phase. I'm Mr. Ben, and today I am joined by Justin. Is this third, fourth trip to the build phase podcast for you?
Yeah, something like that. What's up versus babies? What's going on?
Enough times that we cannot accurately remember the count of how many times you visited us.
Yeah, and distantly enough apart that it's hard to do research on that too.
So, the main thing that I want to talk to you about today is the recent Seattle Regional and your main character choice that you piloted to a pretty decent success at that event. But before we get into that, let's sort of rewind the clock and introduce you to the community again. How did you get into Versus? What kind of brought you into games? Let's start from the basics.
Well, I played a little bit. I mean, I guess the main thread through this is that I'm kind of a Marvel nut. So if there's a game out there and it's something I kind of want to play and it's got Marvel in it, then I'm just kind of all in on it. So this was kind of perfect for me because I had played a little bit of the OG verses on the DS back when it was a mobile. That was how you played your mobile games, I guess. And I never got into the trading card aspect of it because I was just at the time of my life, I really that interested in doing the lottery packs and things like that. And so I found it on the DS, and with that one, they had the whole, you could kind of unlock packs, but it didn't cost you any extra money compared to what you're paying for the game itself. I think on the PlayStation Network they had the same thing, but you still had to buy packs at like $3 a pack or something like that. With the DS, then you just earned points and then you could buy packs that way. And so I was like, this works with my budget. And so I learned to play it that way, and eventually the game died. And the DS, it didn't have any updates to it either, so it only went up to a certain number of cards, a certain number of expansions. So eventually I just kind of got bored with it. Couldn't convince my friends to play it, and so just kind of left that scene and grew up, got a little bit older, had some extra income, and there was just something about me. I was like itching to get back into a fantasy card game of some sort, and I wanted to do a Marvel thing, and I knew they had Legendary, but I wasn't really into that style of deck building game, and so I kind of ignored that. And then I was just thinking about, like, am I gonna do Magic? Like, looking at the landscape, it was like there was Magic, there was Pokemon, there was Yu-Gi-Oh, and I had some experience with Magic, and so I was like, is this am I gonna like get back into this lottery pack style thing again? And basically I just kind of waited out the market until Versus came back onto the scene. And even then I kind of waited a little bit. I was like, oh, that's cool, but I don't want to invest in a card game that's just going to die because most CCGs die after the first year or two. Um, but basically, eventually, my brother got me the starter box, and then from there, it's kind of the rest of the story kind of unfolds as you might expect. So, just slowly got caught up on all the expansions, and I kind of joined in right around when they started doing monthly releases, and so was just able to pick up all the cards from there. So that's basically how I got into it.
So even though it sounds like if it was the monthly releases, that was around the Deadpool, the New Mutants expansion.
Yep,
But
yep.
even if those were the cards that were new, you still started with the base set, Defenders, A-Force, and kind of went that path with it before you got into the monthlies, or was it picking up Deadpool and trying to mix that in with base set cards? I'm curious what your early game meta was like.
Yeah, it was like I said, my brother kind of started me, so he got me the base set, and then when I started, looking into what was out there, then with the monthly releases, I was like, okay, I'll get these, and I think I started seeing some deals as well on some of the older sets, like Defenders was there. It was occasionally up for $6, and so I was just like, I'll get the older sets, but I'll just wait until they go on sale, and a lot of them did. I think I got the Monsters box for half off. I got Defenders for $6. I ignored Alien and Predator for a long time because, like I said, I'm kind of in it for the Marvel. But eventually, it got to the point where I was like, I bought everything, and so it's like, well, now I need my fix. So here's two more boxes that I can chase after and get some new versus cards into it. So, but
Yeah,
yeah, that's
at this
that's how I ended
point,
up doing it.
it's probably fair to say that you have an appreciation of the game mechanics beyond your the love of Marvel that drew you into the game. I'm curious though, if
Yeah.
Upper Deck lost the Marvel license and Versus was going to go entirely in a new direction, would you stick around for the game mechanics at this point? Have they won you over that thoroughly, or are you still kind of chasing Marvel wherever it goes?
I mean, realistically, I would probably eventually stop collecting, depending on what kind of IPs they bring in. Like, I'm excited for the new ones that they have announced, so no shade there. But there's definitely a part of me that's like, if I'm gonna spend money and time on something, then I want it to be something that I really love, and I do love the mechanics of it. But like, my one true love is definitely Marvel. So. If something else came around to kind of replace it, like if Disney came up with their own Marvel card game and they pulled the license completely from Versus, then I could see myself drifting over there. But also, I'm having a kid this December, and so who knows what the future of my life will look like if I will have any time for games at all for the next 2 or 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, those first couple of years, it's pretty rough.
Yeah.
It's real rough, actually.
So yeah, I
Uh,
don't want to sound like a fair weather friend,
no,
but
no.
it's not like I have any less enthusiasm for the community as it is right now. So
Yeah,
and
and I think it's valid that if what you love about the game is being able to play with the characters that you recognize, if the game switched to being like My Little Pony, that would
mhm.
be less exciting. Like, I don't think that makes you a fair weather friend, like that's
Yeah.
a valid viewpoint to have.
And for me personally, the new Mortal Kombat cards are really exciting because you had a podcast episode about it recently, and I think it was you were kind of talking about how you haven't really played it since Mortal Kombat 3 back in the day. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, someone said that, and I'm kind of the same way, but at the same time, like those characters, I have such a fondness for because they kind of came out while I was coming of age, and they had these really interesting dynamic designs, like the cyborgs and the ninjas, and just like the different kinds of characters that were different than like your typical Marvel DC superheroes. Like that was kind of the first IP after maybe Ninja Turtles where I was like, wow, these characters are really dynamic and really cool. And yeah, it just really sucked me in. So having those characters come to Versus is like really exciting for me, even though they're not Marvel. So kudos to the team for bringing that in.
I think part of it is I was right at the age where being into something that my parents really didn't appreciate, so,
Yeah.
something something that really upset my parents was like cool, you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was very subversive and being like a preteen or a teen boy or whatever. I was just like, oh, this is really exciting.
Yeah,
So much
and
blood.
to stay up late. until the folks go to bed, so then I can get out the Super Nintendo version and even to play the censored version, I had to like do it surreptitiously.
Yeah, I mean, I most of my experiences with this, most of my experience was in the arcade because my parents never let us really have a video game system. Like we had some PC games, but never had a console, and so sometimes we could go over to our friend's house and play it. But for me, it was the old school arcades at the bowling alleys and the roller rinks where all the lights are turned out and it's really dark and there's all this like colorful wallpaper and
Hmm.
gaudy carpet and everything like that, and you're just like pumping quarters in only to lose to like the AI. And yeah, that was my experience with it.
Yeah, or lose to the older kid who's like been reigning champion on the cabinet for like 3 hours. Yeah,
Yeah, he's like standing there, by himself working through the ladders, and then I go up and I put my quarter into the machine and interrupt his game, and then it starts this, one versus one, and he completely creams me,
yeah,
2-0, and then he just goes back to his machine, and I was just like, you know, just like it was so thrilling, all the same, even though I just like got totally creamed.
yeah, yeah. It was always so intimidating. Well, hey, this is getting way off topic from the original reason I wanted you to come on the show and chat today. But I guess since we're on the topic, who is your number one Mortal Kombat character that you really want to see as a main character or implemented in some way in that expansion?
I don't know if I care who's a main character or a supporting character, but my favorite characters from there were more from the second sequel, Mortal Kombat 3. So I liked Cyrax and Sector and Baraka and just like those kind of weirdos. Like Cyrax and Sector are like two of the most 90s characters I can think of, and I would love to see them make a comeback.
Well, they feature heavily in the story of Mortal Kombat 11, so I think it's likely they will. Baraka as well.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so.
Okay, so the announcement at Gen Con of Mortal Kombat was, I agree, a huge deal. But let's talk about the tournament at Gen Con. So you
Yeah.
had the ability to kind of see the results of all the greatest minds in Versus trying their absolute hardest, and the next event was in that same format. So what kind of lessons were you able to take from the Gen Con results? How did that factor into your testing when you were preparing for the Seattle event?
Well, for me, it was pretty apparent that Ms. Marvel was going to be the big threat, and so I was like, in my mind, I was like, I gotta find something like I could either play Ms. Marvel or I could play something that could beat Ms. Marvel, and so I didn't have a ton of time to plan and test and things like that, and so I just kind of went through the character list and looked for something that I thought could beat Ms. Marvel consistently, and I ended up settling on the Wizard.
So, had you had much experience with the wizard previous to this? Was this a character that you had built with or played with in casual games, or that you were at least familiar with, or was this solely based on the idea that you thought he would have a good matchup against Carol?
I did play him once before in the Super Awesome Games Archangel Madness tournament,
Oh, sure.
and so I played the Frightful team to the top of the losers bracket. So I had a little bit of experience with him, but not a ton. It was mostly a lot of hypotheticals crafting in my head, thinking that basically I looked at the wizard and I was like, I need a way to consistently get counters off of Ms. Marvel and keep her small. And there are so few plot twists in the pool that can be used that would help with that. But the wizard, he's got his little special power that gives him access to four plot twists that no one else has access to, including Savage Surprise and Open Fire to some degree. And so that was a way that I thought could keep Carol down low long enough that I could basically take her out before she could either level or before she could stack too many counters and start doubling up and all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of the idea that I had with the wizard.
Did you give much thought to any of the other potential big bads in the format, or was it, hey, at most versus events, one third to one half of the field is always the best MC. That's Carol, so I just need to focus on that matchup. Like, what was did you have a more holistic approach, or was it very targeted?
Yeah, I mean, once Gen Con hit, then that was kind of my idea. It was just like I got to take down Ms. Marvel, and if I can do that, then I'll do pretty well. And while I was looking at the wizard, I was like, he might be unpredictable enough that I could actually get into the top four and maybe even take the win just by sort of surprising people and annoying them by always. I ended up calling the deck the Wizard Strikes Back because um, basically he if you're coming in at him, he's gonna take you down with him. Like he doesn't have a high defense, but at least he'll take you down with him.
So it sounds like Savage Surprise was the most important of those four. I guess for somebody who's not familiar with the wizard, can you break down what his plot twist power, how that works?
Yeah, so basically you can play any plot twist as a copy of one of the four original generic plot twists, neutral plot twists from the base box. So he can either play a plot twist as an open fire, so that's a +2 attack, um, find cover, which is +3 defense, savage surprise, which is +4 attack on defense, and then the best offense is a good defense, which is +5 defense when you're attacking.
So
And
out of
yeah,
those four, it sounds like Savage Surprise was the MVP.
yeah, Savage Surprise was the key to that deck.
How often did you feel like it really took people by surprise? Given these plot twists, as you already said, are not available in the format for literally any other person to use. How many of your matches do you feel like somebody just like walked into that Savage Surprise and literally got surprised by it?
Um, I think maybe one person one time was surprised by it. Like I don't think anyone was really truly surprised by it, but I know that they were very annoyed by it.
Fair, fair.
Even the fine cover that occasionally came in clutch as well. But you could just see people swinging into him and being like, you know, just hoping that I didn't have a plot twist in my hand. But most of the time I did. So
So out of the plot twists that you ran in the deck, how often, like if you had to put a percentage on it, how often do you feel like you played them as the plot twist they were printed as, and how often was it just feeders for wizard armor?
almost never did I play them for what they were. I pretty much always played them as wizard plot twists.
That's kind of interesting because a lot of these plot twists, when the game kind of first came out, I definitely remember throwing down a little bit of criticism on how, oh, these aren't that good, they're kind of boring. But it seems like Wizard actually, you'd rather have these plot twists than the stuff that's actually legal for him to play, which maybe I was just wrong on how I rated some of those plot twists back in the day.
I mean, I think the key was the format. Like the fact was that actually very few people had access to worthwhile plot twists. I felt like because they were if you're playing unless you're playing the pro reg or anti reg team or photo of course. I felt like a lot of the characters that people chose like they didn't have meaningful plot twists for combat interactions. And so I think that the wizard, that was a distinct advantage for the wizard, is that a lot of people just didn't have plot twists in their deck because I don't think a lot of them were worth playing in the format.
Sure. Sure. So going into your deck list, what are some notable cards that performed well for you? Obviously, if your plot twists are all just copies of stuff that your main character lets you do, that might not be the most interesting part of the list. But as far as like your supporting characters, what performed well for you with regard to supporting your deck strategy, but also against the meta that you ended up facing?
I think Jane Foster at 5. was a pretty good one to include, because she, like, when the wizard levels up, he has a cancel power, so he can use an academy or a training ground to cancel combat. And you could, say, burn 3 or 4 of those in a turn to save yourself a wound if someone is attacking with multiple characters. Or if Thor comes down, Jane Foster, you can pay a single academy, a single intellect location or power symbol, and then she'll just heal, she'll just give you an additional health back. And so then instead of so there were times where I'm like looking at all these locations and looking at this board across from me where it's like, oh, there, I can cancel the combat 2 or 3 or 4 times, or I can just take the wound and then next turn spend one of those locations to heal him based on Jane Foster's powers. So I felt like she came in handy once or twice, although not as much as I was kind of expecting. Um, Iron Fist was an MVP, I think, for the whole tournament for anyone who played him.
The card's just good.
Yeah. Nexus of All Realities definitely came in handy because that was good for I had the intellect locations and the skill locations in my deck for the wizard's cancel power, but then I also had some fortresses for might, because I had like Terex in there if I needed to steal counters from Carol, or um, let's see, what else did I have? Oh yeah, I had might makes right as well. So I had some fortresses in there, but it wasn't going to be a super key part of the deck, and so I took one out and I swapped it for a Nexus of All Realities, and that gave me some flexibility to either use it for Terex if I didn't have a fortress out, or use it for Thor if I didn't have an Academy out. And so that ended up being kind of something that was surprisingly useful for me when I was playing.
Yeah, I feel like that card's going to become an automatic inclusion in just about any deck from now. Like in any format where it's legal. It just seems
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean it's one of a kind, but when it pops up, then it's just like super versatile.
yeah, it's hard to like you kind of have to have a reason to not run it at this
Yeah.
point. So what about your list? Would you adjust or do different? Were there any cards that didn't perform the way you wanted or kind of let you down on the day of the event?
Yeah, I had Out of Time in there because I had Tiger Shark to put minus counters on, and I had Night Watch so he could also be Masters of Evil to use Out of Time. And the idea was to basically, like, if I was low on plot twists or something, then I could kind of stall for time and build my hand back up, and keep my main character out of the firing line. But it ended up not working out because basically the deck doesn't want to go into the long game. Like the more your opponent can go into the long game, then the more likely they're gonna get cards that can smash Wizard before he can smash them back. So I would definitely get rid of Out of Time, and I might put in the teleport instead. And Night Watch would be the only activator for that, but I think the amount of times that it Out of Time came in handy, like even if teleport never worked one time, it would still be a wash either way, depending on how you design that deck. So that would probably be the biggest one, just to get a little bit of ramp and get a little bit more ahead of the opponent. And then he wouldn't have to go to the late game to get, the bigger characters that he needs. So I'd probably make that change. That'd be the biggest one.
So it sounds like overall you have a little bit more of an aggressive strategy. Would you go so far as to call this an aggro deck, or is it more kind of like a mid-range?
I'd call it an aggro deck, but mostly on the defense, which is kind of weird to think about. Like when I
Yeah.
rolled the dice to see who was going first or second, I usually chose to go second because I wanted to lure the opponent into attacking the wizard with their main character, and then I would just smash them back, smash them in the face right back. And so then then I could, when I recovered for the next turn, then I could clear off any new characters that they added, and then they'd kind of be back to square one when they're when it gets back to their turn and then they have to attack me again, and then I can just Savage Surprise them and smash them in the face again. So it was pretty effective, and I feel like it's an aggressive strategy because it's something where you want to get out ahead of your opponent, but you're kind of trading wounds a lot early on, and you just want to get like one wound ahead, like, and then hopefully take the game that way. And he can do that by using the combat cancellation and the Jane Foster heals right around turn 5. So yeah, aggressive defensive.
Yeah, I want to be really aggressive, and I want you to hit me, but I'm gonna hit you back.
Yeah.
Is there any other notable things you want to mention about the deck? I tried to hit the high points and the low points there, but if there's any other details you want to throw out, otherwise let's move into round one, talk about how you were feeling on the day of the event.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. So we can go ahead and move on.
Okay, so coming into the day of, you had to feel like you had an outside pick. Uh, Once you kind of got a feel for the room, did you feel like you read the meta right? Like, how did you feel going into round one?
Um, I felt, I mean, to be honest, I did not expect to do as well as I did. Like I had to say I read the meta would be very disingenuous, because I was I was going in to take on the Ms. Marvels, and I think only two of them actually showed up out of 9 players, which was a real surprise to me. But it kind of goes to show that like people are willing to they're not always willing to just lean on what they saw working at the big events. Like a lot of people wanted to take outsider characters and kind of just show people what they could do with them. And so I definitely think that helped me because in my testing, I was testing against my teammate Matt, and he went to the top 4 with his Ms. Marvel deck at Gen Con. And so I was like, oh, if I can beat his deck, then I definitely know I'm on to something. And in all of our testing, I did not beat him once. And so I was like, the wizard is probably not it, but I don't have any time to do anything else, so I'm just going to go and hope that other people aren't playing Miss Marvel, even though I was trying to design this deck to beat Ms. Marvel. And I was like, maybe I can take them down and then die to Ms. Marvel in the top 4 or whatever. And yeah, it turned out that I only had to play one Ms. Marvel the whole time, and I actually did beat her. Um, but yeah, to say that I read the meta and knew that that's what was going to happen would be false.
Well,
So
there
going
is
into
a third of the meta is Ms. Marvel. So if that was the main character you were targeting, that's kind of fair.
yeah, not quite a third, but yeah,
Well, it looks
you're
like
kind
three
of
Ms.
on.
Marvels, two First Evils, and then four one-ofs.
Oh, there were three
If
Ms. Marvels. Okay, so
Yeah,
I'm
if what
forgetting
Patrick
someone.
posted here on the 18th is correct, I'm assuming it is.
Okay. So yeah, I guess it was a third there.
So you're not giving
Um,
yourself
so,
enough credit, man. That's what that.
so yeah, going in, I was like, I'm gonna lose. I was actually talking with Patrick, the event organizer, not Patrick, the tournament winner, and I was like, do I have to go? Like, I'm just gonna lose. Like, what's the point? Like this, I'm gonna be coming back from Hawaii. This is gonna because I was taking a vacation. It's like this is gonna harsh my mellow man. Like, do I have to go? And he was just like, oh my God, yes, you have to go. Just go and have fun. And so, but yeah, so the whole day, when I got there, I was just like, I'm gonna have fun, but I was also like, I'm prepared to lose every match if it comes down to it. But remarkably, that did not happen.
I mean, so often that kind of mindset is what people will talk about after they do very well. Like not being so deeply invested and having to get that victory seems to, at least for a lot of folks, unlock the kind of flow state that you want to have to be able to perform well and make good decisions. So I'm not terribly surprised to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, my wife keeps bringing it up about how bummed I was going in and how much fun I ended up having coming out, and it's just like, I can't believe that. Can't believe that you're right.
Well, that's a good life lesson, man. Like,
Yeah.
not to get all serious about things, but yes, doing challenging things is sometimes intimidating, but often rewarding. So, hey, let's move into round one. So who'd you
Okay.
face in round one, as you assumed you would be defeated?
Yeah. So round one, I faced Patrick. This was Patrick, the guy who won the tournament, not Patrick, the tournament organizer. So, as you can imagine, round one did not go well for me. However, Patrick is a totally lovely human being. He was wonderful, even while he was.
Shout out to
Yeah, I
Patrick.
mean, yeah, what more do you need to say? He's wonderful, even when he's facing. He's a great player to play against. But yeah, he asserted me, and that was the end of the story for me. I lost for the day.
Okay, well, it sounds stable again now. Like it's not doing that robot voice thing. So I guess let's
Okay.
soldier forth. So Patrick Lenahan, round one. I think I heard Surtur there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much all you need to know. No, Patrick is a nice guy and he asserted me and I lost.
Fair enough. So he was on First Evil. It didn't sound like you tested against that main character very much.
No, I
Did
did
you?
not.
So this was sort of an expected outcome. Like I imagine this wasn't much of a blow to your overall like sense of morale for the day.
Right. I mean, like I said, I went in there expecting to lose every single round, and so I did, and it was fine.
Okay.
I mean, it,
So
it was just nice being there with everyone, like being among people who are as excited about your hobby as you are. So, like, it's like Patrick, the tournament organizer, said, it's just like you go there, you'll have fun. Like, don't worry about it. So,
yeah, if you're gonna lose a game of versus to somebody, Patrick Lenahan's somebody I don't mind losing to. Like that guy's always a pleasure to play against.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so going into round two, who'd you end up facing?
Round two
What?
was a bye.
Great.
Yeah. So I was at 1-1 or 0-2, however you decide to look at that. But yeah, didn't play that round. Round three, I played against. I was really excited to play. I was really excited to play round three because I don't know if Bert knows this, but I've sort of had this I don't know, like a vendetta out against him because I've played him in two other tournaments and I beat him both times. And so when I knew that he was coming to this one, I was like, oh man, whatever I do, I have to beat Bert because then I'll have a hat trick of wins against him. And so they announced that it was me versus Bert, and I was like, oh yeah, I've been waiting for this. And then Bert just was like, he just looked at me stone faced. Like when he's in the game, he's just like like he's not joking around.
Yeah,
He's just like he was just like, let's get going. I mean, he didn't even say that, but that was his whole attitude. He was like, this game has begun, and I'm not giving you an inch. And sure enough, he did not do that. So the whole round three, again, it was against the First Evil. So he got Surtur out, and he handed me my sandwich, and that was kind of the end of that round.
wow. So there's only two First Evils in the whole event. You face them in the
Uh-huh.
first three rounds and get surgered twice. That's a
And they would
pretty rough start to the day.
Yeah, and they would both go on to be in the final match. So they earned their place from the very beginning.
So at this point, you had to feel pretty confident that you're not going to make the top cut, right?
Yeah, yeah. I'm like, this day is going like I expected, and that's fine.
Okay. So next round comes up. What are you facing?
So this time I'm facing, I think his name was Zach, and he was playing Ms. Marvel. So it's my first Ms. Marvel.
Wow. So even with the record that you've put up so far, and no disrespect, but a losing record going it generally means your rounds are going to get easier as the day goes on, as you accumulate
Sure.
losses. And here you are facing all tier one characters, just a wall of them.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
Okay.
the whole time I'm thinking about this thing that Vern said in the build phase chat, where I was sort of whining a little bit ahead of the tournament and talking about the wizard, and he just comes on in his Vern way and he says, "Oh, the wizard has an edge against Miss Marvel if you build him and play him right." But then he just kind of ends it there,
Yeah,
and
of
so
course.
I'm just yeah, I'm just staring at this text that he sent and just being like, I'm not going to reply to this. I'm not going to give him the dignity of of asking him how, you know, what I should do or whatever. Like when he said that, I was like, okay, I don't know if this is true, but now I have to figure out like what I can do to actually make this happen. And I'm only giving Vern a little bit of crap because he's going to analyze my deck and talk about what he would change on his podcast. So, you know, I he has an opportunity to put his money where his mouth is.
Fair enough. Shout out to the Apex boys.
Yeah. So so yeah, I ended up winning that one, and you know, I guess that's something that Vern can feel smug about now because he was right in that case.
Did you
Like I
feel
played
like
Ms.
you had an
Marvel.
edge? Like, did you feel like there was an advantage going into the match in your favor?
I think I had a slight edge there, but there were definitely a couple rounds where it could have gone either way, depending on, you know, what kind of cards he could pull out of his hand.
Mhm.
But a lot of it was just me kind of relying on the plot twists and, you know, kind of hoping that he didn't have plot twist answers to that. So a lot of times I could go in pretty confident, like it always sucks when you play two or three plot twists and then someone plays like a power up and then cancels all of that, like cancels all of that work, and then you lose three cards to their
Oh,
one card and you don't even get the effect off. But a lot of times I found when I was playing the wizard against Ms. Marvel, if I could get high enough to strike her, then usually I didn't have to worry about, you know, surprise plot twists coming in and ruining the fun. So I think that's a lot of where the wizard's edge is the confidence in knowing that what you put down is going to get results.
how similar was this Ms. Marvel to the Ms. Marvel you were testing against with Matt?
Um, I couldn't tell you. I don't
Okay,
honestly remember.
fair enough.
I do remember though that he was having a hard time drawing the energy locations that he needed. So that was definitely, um, I think that's a lot of what made me feel like I had the edge was, and it was kind of pure luck, but it just took him a long time to get the energy locations, and then by the time he did, then I had answers that I could put out there.
That sounds like a Team Apex strategy. Assume your opponent's going to draw poorly and therefore you have the edge. That's we've cracked the nut, Vern. We figured it out.
And that's where I got to use Terex. I think that was the one time I got to use Terex the whole tournament and
It seems
steal the
like he'd be
counters away.
pretty good in the Miss Marvel matchup. That could be a real backbreaker, that card.
Yeah.
Okay, so you collected your first win, I guess second win if you count the bye. Did this change your outlook at all on the day? Were you like, okay, that got that under my belt. I'm gonna go get another W, or was it still just kind of like, hey, live and let live. I'm just here to for the lols, so to speak. Like, did that affect your mindset at all?
It was cool to beat Ms. Marvel for sure, and you know, I was looking at my record with the buy as a win, and so I was like, oh, I guess I'm 2-2 now, so that's actually not too bad. That's honestly better than I was expecting to be at this point. So yeah, it was cool.
Like, were you feeling like, okay, I've sort of like won the day, like I can rest on my laurels, or did that inspire you to like go out and like win another round, maybe try to push for a cut finish?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely inspired me to win another round, especially when I saw that I was going to be playing Joe. I think his name is Joe. Um, yeah, he was playing She-Hulk. And so that was, you know, I had only pretty much prepared against Ms. Marvel. So anyone who wasn't Ms. Marvel or the First Evil, I was kind of like, I think I might have a shot at this. Like, I think this is where the Wizards, you know, unpredictability has an advantage. And so, So yeah, so going into round five, I was like, I might actually have a shot at this one.
So how did it end up playing out?
Yeah, so that one I did end up winning, but it was after time was called, and that one was a very tense game. Like it was a tie when time was called, and I didn't even realize that time was coming up. Like it was, I just felt like we were both very had our head in the game, and it was kind of back and forth a lot. And I remember that when I finished and I had won, while I was waiting for round six to come along, I could feel my hands shaking. Like I suddenly realized that like that round had kind of taken a lot out of me mentally because it was so close, and we were kind of sitting there, time is called, and we're kind of sitting there, and everyone who is done with their games is like gathering around, so you start to realize that like all the eyes are on you and it's so quiet because no one wants to
Mhm.
get caught cheating or whatever accidentally. And so yeah, it's just this really intense moment. And for even while I was starting to play around six, I just had to like breathe and just like calm my nerves and stuff like that. So that one was a cool one. But yeah, it took a lot.
Yeah, I want to just flag the cheating comment is somebody accidentally giving something away. Not that there was,
Right.
yeah, I just didn't want to let that fly past and anybody think that we were insinuating that there was like planned malfeasance taking place. It's
Yeah, no one
respect
was
for the
trying to
players.
cheat.
Yeah.
Yeah, they just didn't want to tilt the game by saying something stupid.
Yeah, exactly. I knew what you meant. I just wanted it to be clear, you know?
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of cheating stuff going around in chess and poker right now. We don't need we
Oh
don't
yeah.
need to drag verses into it. Okay, so this went to wound count going to the clock, I assume, and you were able to
Yep.
what put one extra wound. Was this Jane Foster came down and healed the wound off? Like, was there a dramatic finish to this, or did you just kind of grind out and end up counting up wounds?
I think I don't remember the exact play. Let me look over my deck real quick. It might have been, I think it was Iron Fist ended up getting an extra hit, or maybe the wizard the Iron Fist cleared someone out and the wizard went in for a hit or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but um, yeah, it was pretty standard play. I don't think there was anything special that I did.
Okay, fair. So now you've got a winning record, and are you looking at where you're ranked in the standings, or are you still kind of thinking like, whatever?
Yeah, yeah, we were all kind of doing the math and trying to figure things out. And while I was playing, I don't remember if his name is Hampton or John. He's Hampton in the Discord, but I think he said his actual name was John. So I apologize for not um, getting that official. But while I was playing him, we kind of discussed a little bit, and I realized that if I don't know the exact math of how it worked out, but if he beat me with Deadpool, then he would have a shot at top four. And if I think the way it worked is if I beat him, I would have a shot at top four. But I was looking over at Bert playing Matt, and Bert would have to beat Matt for me to make top four. If Matt beat Bert, then Matt would have made top four. And so I just remember like I'm like I have to win, and also my teammate has to lose for me to make the top cut. And so I'm like
That's not a
sitting there
great feeling.
playing, yeah, but also rooting against my own teammate,
Yeah.
so that I can make this happen.
Okay, so Deadpool, the underworld version, this is kind of a wacky main character. This is not somebody that sees a whole lot of play. Did you feel
Uh,
confident going into this, or being in kind of an outsider pick yourself, was this like, man, I would much prefer this was something that I actually thought about and prepared for? How familiar are you with this wacky Deadpool guy?
I'm pretty familiar with him. I think he's an interesting choice just because um, with with everyone having two health, then Deadpool kind of gets a free XP each turn. You kind of know that if someone comes down, then he's going to automatically give At least at his first level, he's going to get that extra bonus health XP.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I put Night Watch down and saw how much XP that he single-handedly gave Deadpool. And meanwhile, I'm playing the wizard, and he's a 2/4 and I'm a 3/3, so all I have to do is fly over his front row and play an open fire, and then I can stun him. And so once I realized that, like, as long as I protect my position, then I can just kind of I can just kind of grind him down without even having him level up. And I think he was bringing characters out, but he didn't have a lot of flyers, and so it's just like fly over the front row and hit him, fly over the front row and hit him. And I did get him up to level 2. I did end up leveling him up there, but that was after I had leveled up the wizard, and so I think then he's a 6/6 and I'm a 7/5. So then it's like, oh, now I can just attack him without even playing plot twists. And
Yeah.
so, or I could even play them as like fine covers. And so then I just had to get one wound ahead of him. And um, that was one where, as the game was going on, I was like, oh, I'm pretty sure I have this one. Like he played well, but I just kind of, as it went on, I just gained more and more confidence, and I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna do this, and I did.
Okay. So you finish your game. Did you wrap this up before your teammate's game that was also going to play a role in deciding your fate here?
I think, and one more thing I want to say is I also remembered this is where I was kind of realizing that Underworld they have Mercs for Money as a plot twist, but because it didn't have access to the rest of the Defenders, or the Underworld plot twists, I was like, oh, that was one of those things where I could go in confidently and know that he wasn't going to have something that was going to surprise me, because like the Underworld team is underrepresented in the format.
Well, for sure.
So that was that. And I think by the time I won, I think Matt had already lost. So then I was pretty confident that I was going to be in the top 4 at that point.
I guess before we jump into talking about your top cut rounds, where was your head at? To go into the event and be like, "Oh, I'm just here for the lulls. I didn't really feel like I was going to do that well." And now you're looking at actually making top cut. Was that a little trippy? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely like the thing that I felt the most was some minor form of shame, I think, because I had gone in so kind of downtrodden about it, and then to have made it, all the way, and I just could hear my friends and my wife in my ear being like, "Oh, you thought you were going to lose. You thought you were going to do so bad. We had to put up with you whining this whole time, and and then here I am in the top 8 or top 4 rather." And yeah, I could definitely, I was definitely like a little bit put in my place by my own actions, I suppose.
Well, a
But yeah,
lesson in believing in yourself, to be sure.
yeah. And other than that, I was overjoyed. Like it always feels good to do well in these situations. So
For sure, winning is always a better feeling than losing. Even if
yeah,
you're having a great time throughout the whole event, winning just it makes it that much better.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, so looking at top 4, who is your opponent? What main character were they on? What were you thinking about the matchup leading into it?
So top 4, I was back to Patrick. So the first guy that I played that morning was now the guy that I was going to face in top 4. And if you recall, he pretty much handed my butt to me in in the Swiss rounds. So I wasn't really expecting to get any further than that. And but I did want to put my best foot forward and do the best that I could. So Patrick was on first evil, and in the first round it was over pretty quickly. He pretty much started me right away, and while I was playing that, then my wife actually showed up to cheer me on, I guess, and to pick me up at the end of the day. And so it was a little bit weird having her, like, not in a bad way, but just kind of knowing that she was there. And I really wasn't paying any attention to what anyone else was doing besides what I was doing. But afterwards she told me that she had approached Bert and she was like, "Oh, I know who you are. You're Bert. You're a pretty good versus player. You're the Black Hurricane," and stuff like that. And from what I understand, Bert was just like, yeah, and who are you? Like, how do you know so much about me?" So, um, yeah, it was a little bit funny hearing her talking, sort of swooning over, this guy as if she had never known a talented versus player in her whole life.
Yeah, it's very rare to run into someone of that caliber.
Yeah. But yeah, that was funny, and shout out to Bert. It was cool because he came all the way from the East Coast, so he was definitely traveling from furthest away.
He really wanted a
So yeah,
regional this year.
yeah, that's true. Um, but it was great to have her show up just in time for me to lose my first round. Um, but then we went into the second round, and this one I actually feel like I had a pretty close shot at it. I didn't end up winning it, and so that was the end of the road for me. But I feel like I was pretty dang close to it. Mostly using that team Apex strategy of hoping the opponent wouldn't draw the cards that they need, and
Vern would be so proud.
yeah. And Patrick just could not level. Like it was ridiculous. He's on first evil. You KO cards from the bottom of your deck, and if it's a character, then he gains an XP. Like both sides do that. So he does it, and I do it. I think you have to do that. I think you have to get 6 XP if I remember right. And for the longest time, he just could not gain XP. Like over half my deck is not characters, and so I wasn't doing him any favors. And his deck is mostly characters, but he was not getting any of his own characters in the KO pile. And so, the whole while I was just using the wizard to fly over, play open fire, deal some wounds, some wounds against the first evil, and I got him up to 4 wounds pretty quickly, and that's when things kind of started to stall out a bit because then he started to, I think at that point he was getting the blockers that he needed, and then he did finally level eventually, and so he had racked up a good number of laboratories in his resource row. So then it was, first evil was just doing the thing that first evil does.
Mm-hmm.
There was a point where he didn't have Surtur in his KO pile, and so when he did level, I was like, if I can do this before turn 9, or before he kicks a Surtur into the KO pile, some other way, then I was like, I think I could have him, because as long as I can keep my curve going, then I felt pretty good about it. I had Storm coming up, and I was like, I think I can do this. And eventually he did get Surtur. I got Surtured once, and then I put a Tiger Shark up against him, and so he put the minus counters on him, and so that actually kind of neutered Surtur in a pretty big way, because then if he attacked, he wouldn't have any attack value, and so he couldn't KO locations. So Surtur just kind of sat out there with a couple negative counters for a little while, before he was able to do anything. So I thought that was a pretty good play. And then eventually it just kind of got pretty overwhelming, and I felt like I don't remember the exact situation, but I felt like I had one last chance, at least one final turn, assuming that Patrick didn't call my bluff. So I was showing, it's the wizard. He can cancel combat with intellect and skill locations. I was showing 3 of them in my resource row, and I was hiding one in my hand. And so I was putting down fortress locations instead, when it was time to put down resources, just keeping this one extra cancel tucked into my hand so I could discard it, and save me a wound if I needed to. And so he had his main character in the back, and he had 3 attackers in the front row. And I was eyeing his formation very keenly because if he sent each of those three attackers into oh, what was it? It was, let's see. Yeah, if
Sounds
he
like you
sent
could fog one more attack than he had unless he committed everybody to the front row. Is that kind of the situation?
Yeah, so he had three attackers in the front row. I had three cancels for him. Or I think he had four attackers in the front row. That's what it was. He had four attackers. I had three cancels, and so he could attack um, three times, and I would turn over each of those locations, and then he would attack a fourth time, and then I would discard from my hand and sort of surprise him, and then basically he wouldn't have any attackers left, and so then I could buy myself an extra round that way. And I think I might have had uh, Thor in my hand, something like that. But basically, I felt like I could buy myself an extra turn. But sure enough, he read the field, he played it right, and so he at the very last second he moved his last attacker up to the front row. So even if I had canceled that last combat by discarding from my hand, then he had one more attack that he could make, and that's what he ended up doing. So his last attacker was Thanos, and I just looked up at him and said, "Give me a snap," and he snapped, and that was the that was the end of the game.
Well, you
So
said
yeah,
he
that
made the decision at the last second, but knowing Patrick the way I do, I suspect he waited several seconds after the last second and then made the decision.
yeah, I mean, I was just like, trying to keep my poker face, but in my mind, I was smirking. I was like, "Ooh, I might not win this, but I'll get one up over on him, just by surprising him one last time or whatever." But nope, he figured it out. He read it 100% correct.
Well, it's hard to feel bad dropping a series to the person who went on to get crowned champion. In some kind
Yeah.
of way, it's almost like if the champion's the main character of the event, you were like one of the disposable anime enemies on his way to the coronation, so to speak. So, that feels way better than like dropping a game to somebody who went on to do nothing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I was pretty beat from that day because like I had just flown in from Hawaii the morning before. Like I did an overnight. We landed in Seattle. I drove to Federal Way, and then we played the first event on Saturday, and then I just stayed with my friends up in that area, and then played the tournament the next day. So I was like going on not a ton of sleep after changing four time zones after
Yikes.
a very relaxing vacation. So it was a pretty wild time.
So
But yeah, I was
overall,
kind of ready to go.
it's probably fair to say that you're glad you conceded to the wisdom of your friends and went to the event after all, yeah?
Yeah, for sure. And I would have given the same advice to me if I was in the same position, but I just couldn't see it for myself.
Sure. Well, that's why we have good friends around us for
Yep,
those kinds of
yep,
moments.
that's
So kind
right.
of bringing things to an end, were there any other like comments about the overall regional weekend that you had or thoughts on the format that maybe we didn't touch on when we were talking about deck construction?
I just thought it was really fun. I enjoyed the side event Homo Superior, which was like basically all X cards. I ended up getting second place that first day, so really I was kind of on fire that weekend. Earned a what was it, dramatic entrance big card for that one.
Oh, that's cool.
So, but just being with versus players and playing with them, like everybody there was awesome. Everyone was super friendly. I hung out with a few people traveling from out of state, and just everyone was really cool. And it's always great to just be with your friends doing, your online, your the friends that basically only online, and finally get to meet them in person and just do the thing that you love to do together. It was really cool.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely wish I could make it to more events each year. I'm a little jealous of these guys like Bert that are like doing the whole circuit, hitting all the regionals.
Yeah, that's some commitment. I was impressed by that.
All right. Well, I guess that kind of brings us to the end of the event. Here at the end of the show, I want to give you a chance to plug, promote, shout out anybody, anything, and the floor is yours.
Basically, the one big thing that I'm continuing to work on right now is an Instagram account called Guardians 3000. So if you're one of the 5 people in the world who liked the original Guardians of the Galaxy team before the movie team was put together, I'm basically doing issue recaps and deep detailed dives into all of the early issues of those Guardians of the Galaxy, and that's Instagram at Guardians 3000. And then otherwise, I run the Wish Pile, which will probably not happen at least at the same time this year because I'm going to be having a baby, and that will have to take a back seat at least for a little while.
Yeah, for
And
real.
yeah, and other than that, Deconstruct the Universe is on creative hiatus still, but maybe that will be making a comeback sometime soon as well.
Great. Well, hey, as always, man, it's fun to have you on the show. I'm glad you were able to take the time on as difficult as getting this one scheduled was. I really appreciate you making the time to come and talk about your experience at the Seattle Regional.
Yeah, thanks for putting up with my pestering text messages, and it's always a pleasure to be on your show. So thank you for inviting me.
Great, man. Well, I'm sure we'll have you back again next time you just sort of like begrudgingly luck your way into a top cut.
Yeah,
All right.
sounds
Well, till
good.
next time, go win some games.